Hi, this is Stephen, and this is Astro Indicator Update, episode 58, and today's date is July 21st, 2023. Today, we are going to be looking at an addition to a topic that I touched upon in my last episode. And in that one, I was looking at Trump's astrology and RFK's astrology. And there's something I missed, and I wanted to add Trump's declinations that are challenging at the moment and become exact in October. I'll also be looking at a chart related to the BRICS meeting that's coming up in August, which is a large block of countries and the trading agreements that they have between each other. A number of astrological things are taking place, particularly in the U.S. over the next several months. We'll touch upon the Dow Jones, the S&P, and the parallels to the chart patterns that we see taking place over the last 5, 6, 7 years to what was taking place in the 1920s. I'll also look at some forecasting hits that I've had on my astroindicator.com site, and then touch upon the fact that I do personal consultations. Okay, so this is what I presented in my last episode a month ago. Charts Trump natal chart is in the middle here. The transits are, as of July 19th, a few days ago, are on the outside. Now, generally, because of all of Trump's legal attacks that are taking place right now, I felt that he had enough positive transits happening currently and over the next several months that he was going to be able to at least weather the storm of these attacks. He was going to have Venus transiting his ascendant, and then going stationary and reversing, and then coming back and crossing over his ascendant twice during this several month period. He had Jupiter up in the 9th house dealing with legal issues and proceedings, and normally the position of Jupiter indicates where positive outcomes usually take place. And so both those were contributing to kind of my interpretation that he was going to survive, this attacks by the deep state, in my estimation. And so, I went with that, and then I said, well, I really hadn't looked at Trump's progressions or his declinations, and these are two other methods for evaluating the character, the quality of a certain time period, past or present, relative to one's natal chart. And so I looked at his progressions, and if you're new to astrology, there's a number of different types of progressions. Maybe the most commonly used one is called secondary progressions. And this would just take too long to go into the details of how this is arrived at, but it's a little bit more theoretical than transits. Transits are where the planets are in the sky right now relative to your natal chart. Well, in Trump's progressions, and this again was to this week, he has many planets conjoined in his 12th house, and the ones that basically are closest to his ascendant are, excluding Juno, this asteroid right here, are Jupiter, Moon, and Venus. So he has the Moon, which is the fastest moving element in progressions, is currently conjunct Venus and Jupiter. So this basically compounded what I see in the transits, is that these very beneficial, positive energies were prominent in Trump's chart at the moment. Maybe that's why his popularity is up. And I'm not promoting Trump or anything like that. He's just a public figure, and I wanted to look at at his astrology. So this reinforced the transits, okay? But then moving on, I have a lot to cover today. Moving on, I looked at his declinations. And here's a program that I have on my iPad. It's called Astro Gold. You know, it costs a little money, but it's a very nice program. But like any astrology program, it'll list out just a data sheet of what, where your planets are located and how many elements you have in this, how many planets you have in this element and that and so forth. Well, in that, on this sheet, which I've made a copy of right here, you can see, and I'll draw a figure, you can see that Trump's natal declination of his sun, I should have used a freehand thing here, but that's the position of his sun by declination in his natal chart. It's 23 north 15 minutes. Donald Trump, natal chart, that's where their sun is. Well, you can essentially do the transits of his declinations over time. And this is a transit. This is where his planets that are, generally the planets, the planets in general are located right now. But this is where they are located by declination. And if you come down to Pluto, which is right here, again, I'll do this kind of slowly. What do you see? You see the exact same position of Pluto. So the way you describe this is that Pluto, by declination, is parallel his natal sun. And Pluto moves very slowly. It's happening now. He's feeling it now. And maybe this is what the severity, intensity of the media deep state attacks on him is most represented by in astrology, is this declination position. Well, my point here is that this won't become exact until October, because this is when I made this chart, October 19th. I knew it was close currently, but then I projected ahead and I wanted to see when it was exact. And normally when it's exact, that's when the challenges are greatest for that individual, particularly when it comes to Saturn or Pluto and so forth. So, the negativity is going to be, whether he's feeling it or it's external, it's going to be the most, it's strongest in the coming months. And what really, another thing I wanted to point out, what really seemed very surprising to me is this October is when, in my last episode, I discussed RFK Jr.'s transits. And he was having a very similar transit in October of Pluto transiting his natal sun. And so it seems very odd and extraordinary that both of them would be having, the peak period for these challenging astrological transits happening in October. And then they slowly start to diminish, okay? So anyway, I wanted to cover that because I missed it last week. Astrology is complicated, and sometimes it's, you don't want to get into the weeds too much, but this is just really stood out to me, and I wanted to touch upon it. Okay, so the BRICS. This is important. A lot of people don't understand this, but the U.S. dollar has been the reserve currency of the world, I think close to 100 years, and we went off the gold standard in 1971 or 72. And since that time, the whole world has been operating under what are called fiat currencies, okay? Again, I can't go too detailed here, but none of them are backed by gold. And so that allows governments just to print money at will, pay for wars or whatever, increase the inflation of their currency, which increases prices for things. And now we have a block of countries that has not liked being basically under the thumb of the U.S. financial system, because the U.S. has, in a way, weaponized the U.S. dollar and has controlled a lot of the other economies of the world because of their reserve currency status. Well, anyway, there's been a lot of clues and announcements over the last 2 years that this block of countries called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, want to create a new currency that's either backed by gold or commodities, a basket of commodities, and get away from the US dollar. Now, I can't go into too much detail because we get opposing announcements recently that this meeting is not going to be an initiation of this new currency. Some people say it is, and so forth. But I got curious. Having a background in astrology for 50 years, I know that the astrology symbols often represent the character of a person, event, and so forth. And when I looked at the astrology of this BRICS meeting, it starts August 22nd in Johannesburg. I was sort of, it just, to me, everything stood out as being reflective of an announcement that's going to surprise people. And I think the purpose of the meeting really could revolve around this new currency, even though people are contradicting that. There's a certain group of people saying, no, it's not going to happen, or it's going to happen very slowly. But anyway, this is my 2 cents for the whole thing. The sun in this chart of this event is squaring Uranus, okay? And so here's the sun, here's Uranus. It really should be red, okay, but it takes too long to change the colors. So it's approximately 90 degrees away from each other, okay? The sun represents the identity, the direction, the focus, the purpose of this meeting. And here we have the planet representing change, innovation, something unusual, something new, a new direction taking place, something radical, okay? This just, stands out in this chart, that this is what's happening. In addition to this, we have, let's see, we have, oh, what happened? What am I doing here? Wrong button. We have an opposition. None of that works. Excuse me. Let's get rid of this. Oh. Okay. Let's see. This is what happened. Okay. I'm sorry. Got mixed up. And see if hang on to your hat. Hang on to your seats. So we have an opposition to Sun, and we have the opposition is kind of a wide opposition to Saturn, and then we have the square to Uranus taking place. Well, I just went over what the Uranus square Sun meant. Something, a new announcement looks like it could very well happen. The Saturn opposition to the Sun, to me, indicates that this is happening so that greater stability, a Saturn term, security, a Saturn term, will be enabled by this new trading currency. And so they're doing it for their own internal security interests. And so some people say that could be an opposing energy, but I think it ties into, the announcement that they could be making here. So what else is going on? Well, we have, I won't draw on the lines, it takes too long. So we have a grand trine between Uranus, Mars, Pluto. Like, can you see this big grand triangle going on there? That means that these three energies are working well together in this for the purpose of this meeting. And you could say that this new change, this announcement, has energy, Mars, and is being activated for the purpose of empowering this trading block. Pluto deals with power. So this stands out, just fits with an announcement of this type, okay? In addition, we have Pluto down here squaring the moon. The moon is in Scorpio. Pluto's related to Scorpio. In some instances, Scorpio has kind of a secretive backroom sort of energy. And so this is, even though they may not disclose everything in this meeting, their interest in empowering themselves is also represented by this aspect. So anyway, a number of things in this chart tell me that they are moving quickly to implement this policy and create a new currency, which would have a big negative effect on the US dollar, likely increasing inflation in the US, and many financial elements in the US hinge upon the dollar being the reserve currency. So this also could inflame, talk of war and so forth. So this is a big deal. We have to track this, keep track of it for your own personal financial interests. Just recently, the US dollar just took a hit. Now this is a graphic of a chart that I include in my website, astroindicator.com. And at that website, which is subscription-based, $5 a month, I forecast ahead of time by several weeks when important things could be taking place, price movements, okay? And I knew way ahead of time that this vertical line, that date, was when something significant could happen. And we had a big drop in the value of the US dollar and the US dollar index. It broke through a number of very important, what are called technical levels. It had a mini crash. It hasn't crashed, but it had a mini crash. And now it's bouncing back up, which is very typical. It's coming back to this line and could very well kind of stay a little bit elevated until around August 1st. And then I see it maybe going back down. But check out my website for $5 a month, and you can track my calls about when you'll see market changes, when it might start going up and when it might start going down. If you're a trader, this is advantageous to combine these forecasts with your standard technical tools. Okay, so the US, we're still in the middle of these long-term, very challenging transits. This is the US chart in the middle, going back to 1776. And on the outside, we have our transits. And look at what we've got here. We have, we have Pluto still conjunct Pluto in the chart. We have Saturn in retrograde right now, comes back within 4 degrees of the US moon. This indicates that we likely are going to go into a much deeper recession. At least that's what the symbols indicate, than people are calling. And on top of that, we have Uranus. It's at 22 degrees Taurus. It gets up to 23 and then starts going retrograde. It is, within 3 degrees of being square our moon. And this is that rebellious, on the countrywide level. It means maybe seeing how bad things are more clearly by more people, activities to radically reform and change what's going on, overtly taking place. The Pluto aspect is disintegration and then hopefully some rebirth appearing in the future. And Pluto is coming back. It's at 29 right now. It's coming back to get back to 27, but not precisely, because when Pluto goes direct, when it starts to move forward again on October 11th, it'll be at 2753, and then from that point on, very slowly it starts moving away from Pluto. So symbolically, that can represent, that we're past the worst period. However, we have these other aspects going on over the next year, and a big one is this Uranus squaring the moon, which could just represent more kind of tumultuous time periods. Saturn indicates things are slowing down economically, at least in my book, even though the stock market is quite high. I think that's, people are living in an illusionary land on that call. So anyway, these things are continuing. This fall in particular is going to be challenging. I see it in, we were looking at Trump and JFK and in the U.S. chart. Okay, just a brief look at the Dow Jones Industrials. On my website, I have been predicting that the Dow will continue higher, at least for another month or so, maybe another month. This red line often represents a point when a market will reverse and go in the other direction. Okay, you can kind of see it here, reversal here, an extenuation, let's say, of this bounce back here. And so I think the Dow Jones, S&P 500, they're in bubbles, and people who think that this is going to continue forever need to maybe be a little more conservative. Let's just put it that way. It may continue at this level for another month, but then these bullish astro dates that I've drawn on the chart, they become less prevalent, which usually indicates a market starting to go down. Recently, I read a pretty good article, and he's written several on it, of what he calls the coming Great Depression. I don't know if it'll be a Great Depression, but the markets could go down considerably. And this was found at of2minds.com, Charles Hugh Smith. He writes about economics in everyday layman terms, and I recommend him. Well, in this article, Charles also included this chart, which is, stands out. It's kind of an undeniable mirroring of what's been going on recently in our main indexes. So this is the S&P 500, the largest 500 companies in the U.S., a big index. And this is going back to 2000, so a 20-year period, long-term chart here of this huge rally based upon all the quantitative easing by the Fed, the printing of money, giving money away to people. And this is what has resulted in a huge bubble of inflation in the indexes. And so this is where we're at right now. And if you look back in history, and this, you can do this with a number of different markets, comparing different time periods, they are not always predictive, okay? But there's something to consider seriously, is the main point. When you look back at the S&P 500 in 1916 to about this date over here, he didn't put it on the chart, but it's approximately 1934 or 5. What you see is a remarkably similar pattern taking place over that same 20-year period, okay? And it almost appears like we are right here where this red arrow is. Now, there's no 100% certainty that we're going to drop by 90%, but there are a number of parallels and similarities between that 1920s time period where money was easy, it was easy to get money to speculate, and what we've just recently gone through over the last 10, 12 years. So something to consider seriously, particularly if you have a lot of money in investments. Okay, Bitcoin. I wanted to touch upon Bitcoin. This is a chart, again, from my website, astroindicator.com. There was a very rare astrological event back here in the latter part of June. It never happened in the Bitcoin chart. It's going to happen again several times over the next 6 months. This energy. And I said it's likely to be bullish, okay, but I didn't have a historical precedent. And we saw Bitcoin, Ethereum kind of go up 6,000 points or so, just over a few days, a week's period of time. That is coming up again, and if you want to know when, consider subscribing. The other thing I wanted to point out about this chart is that we're going through a period with very few astrological, important dates in the Bitcoin chart. And we don't really have something strong until we get into August 10th. And I know the commentators in the crypto world are saying, what's going on? Why is Bitcoin not continuing this rally? And it may really test the patience of a lot of crypto people over the next couple weeks. And I can see why, from an astrological point of view, is that we're just going through a dry spell of astrological energy. It's going to return. I think the rally is just beginning. And but if you're a trader, kind of a short-term trader, this is valuable information. Okay, this is the last chart. And silver, this is just another example. Several weeks ahead of time, when I was combining the technical tools in trading with the astrology, I said, we have a number of bullish dates coming up while the market is kind of neutral or a little bit oversold. And look at these two dates coming up in early July. Something could happen, and we broke out within a day or two of one of my key dates that I had specified ahead of time, and we've had a nice rally. Now it's going to kind of start petering out until we get to August 7th or so. At least that's my expectation looking at this. So anyway, if you are into trading, look at these charts, see if there would be some value for you, and the subscription is pretty modest in my estimation. So that's it for today. I've been researching financial astrology for 25 years. I have a master's degree in psychology, actually transpersonal psychology. And you can email me at this address. This is my website. I accept donations. You could use this code very quickly if you would like to send me something. But that's it for today. Again, my name is Stephen. Please hit the like button, and I hope to be doing these more often, maybe on a once a month basis. So if you would like to be notified, subscribe. But thanks for listening. We will see you soon.